Amen. Hope you enjoyed that. That was awesome. That comes from the Chicago church, and I'm not sure many of you guys might have recognized Reuben Marbury. He led the church in Montgomery County, right up the road in Maryland, and now he's out on staff in Chicago. So hopefully you've enjoyed a little bit of flavor from the nation. And if we ever do online again, we'll try to mix that up. But big shout out to our worship leader here, Cliff Gaines, as he's worked super hard through all this pandemic to keep us moving in worship. And thank you so much for Cliff and Hazel and your communion and bringing us to the cross and sharing vulnerably to us. Sorry about the video and the audio. Hopefully that's all working out here. But we are online. Thank you for joining us. I came back last night from Virginia Beach. Daniel and Tabitha Fithian, Dan and Tabby Parks. Now the Fithians, they are married as of last night around 6 p.m. So that was a joyous occasion, and on behalf of them, I know they're so thrilled and so grateful to the Roanoke Valley Church, as you all have been a monumental part of their dating relationship, as they dated for 4 years here in Roanoke. They met at Virginia Tech in our campus ministry, and many of you have been giving to them, supporting them, loving up on them. So you guys are just as big of a part of it as anyone else that was there yesterday. But we had a small wedding in a big barn, and it was a great time. And Dan and Tabby send their love. They are now off to their honeymoon. And again, they'll be coming back to Roanoke, as Dan and Tabby both have occupations, jobs here in the Blacksburg area. So super, super exciting about what God is doing. So praise God for all of that. Amen. If you have a Bible, flip over to Matthew chapter 8. We have been going through the Gospel of Matthew. We will continue that with a short lesson this morning, starting in verse 14. The title of my lesson this morning is, What Kind of Man Is This? What kind of man is this? And what this man and who we're referring to, of course, is Jesus. And that's a question that I pose to us this morning as we think about who Jesus is, as we think about who we really understand Jesus to be. We need to answer that question. What kind of man is this? We know that he's not just a man. He is God incarnate. He is the Word made flesh. We know all those things. But for a moment, if you will, put yourself in the shoes of those who we are introduced to today, as they see Jesus for the first time, as they see Jesus do certain things for the first time. Let that wash over us this morning as we answer that question. What kind of man is this? So starting in verse 14, we're going to read down to 27 this morning. And I have the text up here for you. And here we go. It says, When Jesus came into Peter's house, he saw Peter's mother-in-law lying in bed with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever left her. And she got up and began to wait on him. When evening came, many who were demon-possessed were brought to him, and he drove out spirits with the word and healed all the sick. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. He took up our infirmities and bore our diseases. When Jesus saw the crowd around him, he gave orders to cross the other side of the lake. Then a teacher of the law came to him and said, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. Jesus replied, Foxes have dens and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. Another disciple said to him, Lord, first let me go and bury my father. But Jesus told him, Follow me, and let the dead bury their own dead. Then he got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. Suddenly a furious storm came up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, Lord, save us! We're going to drown. He replied, You have little faith. Why are you so afraid? Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him. Amen. So that's our text this morning, and comes right from the text there in verse 27. What kind of man is this? Is the question the disciples asked when they saw Jesus calm the storm. So we are introduced to a few stories that Matthew brings to us. One in Jesus healing Peter's mother-in-law. Again, another high calling as to what it really means to follow Jesus. And then one we're probably really familiar with and was referenced in our community this morning is that Jesus calms the storm. A little bit of background, and we're actually going to work through this text backwards, starting with Jesus calming the storm. I believe we want to start there because it really is important to answer that question and put ourselves in the shoes or the sandals of the first disciples here in this story. So they've crossed what is known to be the Sea of Galilee. And we've heard this story before, but it was known that the Sea of Galilee could be whipped into a frenzy very quickly. This could be a calm place, and we've been there a few years ago. Beautiful scene, and all of a sudden, storms can rush in, stay in that valley of the Sea of the Galilee, and then whip that lake into a frenzy. So these are experienced fishermen. Many of them were, and here we see them fearful of being drowned. But what I want us to understand here is the mentality and the mindset or the worldview of these first disciples is that we know that Israel or the Jews, they were monotheistic in the sense that they believed there was a God, one God, that was more powerful than any other God. But if you noticed, that would be that it's only one God. But there's some teachings that Israel and Jews, and especially the Gentiles, they believed in many gods. But there was thinking and some belief that Jews believed that there were other gods, but they weren't as superior to Yahweh, the God of gods. So while they're like lowercase g's and Yahweh is big Y or big G, they're the mentality that there could be gods of the winds and gods of the waters and all these kind of things. So it gives you some perspective here when they are crossing the Sea of Galilee that there's literally things trying to stop them from getting across the sea. So there's Gentile gods, there's all different things that these Jews would have had informing them. And the question, what kind of man is this that even the winds and the waves obey him, is really coming from the mentality of this guy is more powerful than all the other forces out there, all the potential little g's out there. We understand that in our 21st century mind that there are forces, there's spiritual forces and of the air, and there's obviously the force of wind itself and the force of the waves in itself. But God is more powerful than all of those. Not just more powerful, but he's actually in control of all those things. He has authority. And if you were with us last week, we looked at the faith of the centurion and how he understood authority. He understood that when a man of authority or a woman of authority says something, it will get done. So the centurion, as a man of authority, understood he could say, go and do this, and it would get done. So understanding Jesus' authority, Jesus didn't have to come under the roof to heal his servant. He just merely needed to say the word. And Jesus was astounded by that type of faith, that you understand authority. You understand me as the authority over all other forces, and that my words in and of themselves are powerful enough to promote and bring healing. So Matthew is just hitting that nail on the head one more time with these three stories to help us answer that question, what kind of man is this? Who do we really believe Jesus to be? And this first story of calming the winds and the waves is that point of what kind of man is this? Well, he's a man that has authority over everything. He has authority over the winds and the waves, something that would strike fear into all of us. I mean, we've had storms throughout our area. I was in Hampton Roads last night, and it was raining red and yellow on the radar all day long. And hurricane, tropical storm coming up the East Coast. I grew up in Virginia Beach. I've seen hurricanes, not to the detriment of many others in our nation, but my goodness, going to the ocean and feeling those waves upon me, feeling the winds whipping around, that's enough to strike fear into anyone. If you've heard thunder and lightning, it's just like God is powerful, and we know those things. We've experienced those things. So for them to understand that God is actually a greater authority than all of these, that God is truly in control. Not that he just has control, but they actually listen to his voice. They listen to his word. And for us this morning, it's super important as we answer this question, what kind of man is this, to really understand God is the ultimate authority. And his word is powerful, to so much so that it controls what you and I cannot. We cannot control the wind and the waves and the water. We don't have a chance. And sure enough, Jesus can. You know, this is more relevant than ever because we are going through something right now in the pandemic, and something that's not seen, and it's brought a lot of anxiety and fear and wonder as to what's going to happen. And many people have asked these questions, you know, Lord, help us. Are you going to save us? When's this going to stop? And it's so important for us to continue to come back to knowing that Jesus isn't surprised by this. God is not up there tinkering like, oh man, I don't have quite a grasp on all of this. No. He has authority over all these things. So it's so important for us to come back and say, my God has all of these things. Obey him. I can put my trust in him. The benefits of that type of understanding that Jesus has all these authorities is that we can be calm in the worries and troubles of life. We can, as we read just a few weeks ago, we can build our lives on the rock at the winds and the waves that will come, and they will beat up against our house. That's just part of being in this world. But we can be people who are never shaken. You know, what's shaken you up recently? What are some things that have got you worried? What has whipped up your anxiety? I know I wrestle with anxiety. I know I can get fearful about my health. I can get worried about what's going to happen with my kids as school starts here in 2 weeks. Am I making the right decision to keep them back? Am I making the right decision to send them in? I get whipped up into fear and anxiety when my character gets exposed. When I have anger issues rather than gentleness, and I get worried about, man, what are my kids going to hang on to? Are they going to hang on to my weaknesses, or are they going to hang on to God's strengths and the things that they may see about God in me that is good? You know, those things can trouble me as a young dad. And even as I see my son become 10 and he's almost a preteen, I can get whipped up into fear of my son and my daughter. Will they become disciples? And I've got to come back to understand that, you know what? God's in control and he has all authority and his word is powerful. And I need my heart, I need my fears, and I need my anxieties and the storms of life, to kind of put this anecdotally, that God can say, be still, and know that I am God. And those fears and anxieties can be calmed. God truly is a man that has authority over all things. And if that's true for us, then the story that preceded Jesus calming the storm makes a whole lot more sense. That Jesus here has these disciples, and we know that the Sermon on the Mount was a collection of teachings, and Jesus had people following him to and fro, and he comes down the mountain in this gospel, and he begins to put into practice everything he taught about the kingdom. So people were following him, and there were the 12 disciples who had already connected and said, okay, I understand what it means to follow you, and they have committed to do so. They didn't know all of what Jesus was, but they were committed to follow him. But we see in this passage from 18 to verse 22 that there are people that are like, okay, I'm following you. I got you. I'm with you. I see what you're doing here, but still have questions, still have concerns, still have reasons to kind of hang on to what they're building here, to not quite fully go all in with the kingdom story. So here we have men that are coming up to Jesus as he crosses the lake, and people are enthusiastic. This man in verse 19 is enthusiastic. I will follow you wherever you go. I mean, that sounds like the centurion, like, whoa, what amazing faith. I haven't heard of faith like this in all of Israel. But Jesus doesn't give that type of response to this man. Jesus, knowing our hearts, has a statement to him in verse 20 that shakes me to the core. He highlights the resting place, the place where you recharge, the place where you hide, the place where you can go and be calm and protected from all things. That's our homes. That's a fox's den. That's a bird's nest where they can go, and this is their little slice of control. This is their little haven of comfort. And it really is Jesus speaking to all of us that if Jesus really is the man he says he is, if he really has authority over the winds and the waves more than we could ever understand, then you know what? I can trust him. I don't need to lean or go to any other comforts other than him. I can fully follow him, knowing that, okay, you know what? As the Son of Man has no place to lay his head, all right, following Jesus, it's not comfortable. Following God in a pandemic, staying firm on your convictions in a world that's watering down Christianity faster than I water down lemonade, my goodness, this is not going to be easy. However, Jesus says, if you understand what kind of man I am, you will be not just eager to say, I'll follow you, but you will be eager to trust him, even if it robs you of a lot of the comforts that we have become so familiar with. You know, becoming a disciple 17 years ago was my first introduction to this high calling of what it really means to follow Jesus. It wasn't a lackadaisical following. It wasn't a piecemeal following. It wasn't a Golden Corral buffet line, take what you want, leave the rest type of following. This was a, oh my goodness, I've got to forsake the comforts. I've got to forsake my hiding place. I've got to forsake the things that I've put authority on that will protect me. I've got to rid them of my heart, to be rid of them, and now embrace the trust in the authority that I can follow Jesus and he's going to take care of it. I was introduced to this other man in verse 21 17 years ago when this man came and said, first, let me go bury my father. This is a parallel passage to Luke chapter 9, verses 57 and 62. There's a little bit more context there, and you can check that out another time. But this is an incredible reason not to get after following Jesus right away. But Jesus says something that almost strikes me as insensitive and like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Follow me and let the dead bury their own dead. You know, what Jesus is saying here would have rang true to the Jews that were surrounding him. They knew their Bible. They knew their Old Testament. They knew the Torah. They knew the prophets. And they knew the calling of their prophets. And this actual verse in verse 22 harks back or beckons back to the calling of Elisha. Not Elijah, but Elisha. And you can read that on your own time. But when Elijah was transitioning to being called to heaven, and Elijah was the next prophet, Elijah called Elijah to follow him, to be the next prophet. And Elijah said, first, let me go back and say goodbye to my family. Let me go back and do what I need to do. And Elijah said to him, what does it matter to me? What have I done to you? Go do what you got to do. And Elisha was allowed to go home and take care of his things. He ended up slaughtering his oxen and burning his plow and then getting after the mission and being a prophet of God. But Elisha was allowed to go home. He was allowed to go back and kind of wrap up the business of his life before he transitioned to following Jesus. Jesus says to this man, let that what is dead take care of itself. Let that dead society go on, but you come into the kingdom of the living. This is a higher calling than the prophet of Elijah. Let me say that again. To be a disciple of Jesus, right now, if you're tuning in with us and you're trying to wrestle, am I a disciple of Jesus? Am I following Jesus? Do I understand his authority? Have I really submitted myself to his authority? Let me ask you this. Do you understand that the calling to follow Jesus is greater than one of the Old Testament prophets? We think of the prophets as like, oh my goodness, these guys sold out, all in, preaching naked, day in, day out, weeping prophet like Jeremiah, getting after it like Jonah eventually. And we think of those guys are, whoa, 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 that's serious authority. That's a serious commitment. Jesus is telling all of us right now, if you understand who I am, if you answer the question, what kind of man is this, well, he's God. Then it makes complete sense that we would forsake the society, the dead society, and actually move on to the kingdom of the living. To follow Jesus is to get after following him right now. What dead things are you hanging on to? The things that don't lead you to living for the kingdom. Things that hold you down. Literally the dusty, rotten bones of the world. The things that will perish. The things that you can package up in a box, but it's still not going to change the fact that it's dead. That's ultimately what this man wanted to do, was to go gather his ancestors' bones and put them into a box and then put them into the family vault. And Jesus is saying, you can do all that, but it's not going to change anything. What's dead is dead. Let's get after the living. Let's get after making a difference. Let's get after bringing life rather than packaging what's dead and that will remain dead. There's so many things in my life that are a waste of time. They're the things that just eke away from me living an impactful life. They are the things of this world. They are the worries of this world. They're the fears of this world. There are the pride of this world where I put my trust in myself, my path, my plans. And you know what? We know what the Proverbs say. A man has plans. Man sets plans in his heart, but the Lord determines his steps. It seems wise to a man, but in the end it leads to death. These are things that have plagued me, that have robbed me from really living a kingdom life. How about you? What now have you settled in to, you know what, let me go first do this? To those who aren't disciples, what are you waiting for? You waiting for this pandemic to pass by so you can really get after community? Come on, let's get after it now. Are you waiting for your kids to grow up so you can finally have enough time to really study the Bible and be in community? No, you need to go after it right now. Are you waiting to kind of get to the next tier of your job in comfort and feeling like, okay, now I'm in a rhythm. Now I've got things figured out. Now I can really devote my time to knowing God. Forget it. Get after it now. That was my thing. When I was in college, oh man, let me figure out college and then I can be a disciple. You know what? I do appreciate for those who are questioning, you know what? You do need to question. This is not for the faint of heart. This isn't some flippant decision. This isn't some compulsive decision to follow Jesus. This is serious because Jesus is serious about bringing healing, about bringing life, and bringing hope to the world, and it's not going to be comfortable. But for the disciples out there, have we gone back to some lesser standard of following Jesus, where we allow ourselves, we give ourselves the excuses of, yeah, I'm following Jesus. I understand what it means to follow Jesus, but I'm not really living for things that bring life. I'm more concerned about right here, right now. I'm living 6 inches in front of my face, and I'm making decisions that are about this world, rather than fighting and praying and going to God, remembering his authority, and to really hang on to the things of the kingdom and be about bringing life. You know, we have an incredible Jesus that we can answer. This man wasn't just a man. This man is God, and he has authority, and he has a high calling, and this calling needs to be thought through. It needs to have deep conviction, and we need to get after it, knowing that it's Jesus and his authority that will calm and love and provide and take care of us. That song we sang, provider, protector, that's all true of our Jesus. That's the kind of man this is. You know, in conclusion, we see Jesus here as we're going backwards through this text. We see Jesus reaching out and healing Peter's mother-in-law. It says here that in verse 16, that with a word he healed all the sick. And he fulfilled this prophet, the scripture of the prophet Isaiah, where he says he took up our infirmities and bore our diseases. You know, what kind of man is this? This isn't just a man who's coming and giving you a high calling and let's get after it and let's get uncomfortable. He's not here just to question us and say, where's your faith? Why are you afraid? He's not here just to get you all fired up and kind of see him as an authority and just charge through life as this kind of king. No, this is a man who has come, who can heal with his word, who reminds us that his authority stretches beyond distance, that his word strengthens us. It changes us. It equips us. It gives us hope. It changes us from the inside out. It calls us. It gives us direction. It gives us, as Hazel shared today, it gives us peace and comfort. No other man, no other words can do that for us. But what I want to leave us with is, what kind of man is this? This is a man who comes and he takes up all of our infirmities. He bears all of our diseases. He comes with all the authority in the world. He comes with every power that just blows other powers out of the water. And instead of him coming with a puffed out chest, with a high calling just to kind of shame you into it, he says, you know what? I'm going to throw all that authority away, and I'm going to bear up all of your weaknesses. I'm going to bear up all of your diseases. I'm going to take up not just your diseases, but I'm going to take up your sin. I'm going to take up the reasons why you have abandoned my authority. I'm going to take up all the shortcomings that we've had this week of when we've chosen to first go after us rather than first go after the kingdom. You know, we're not perfect. We're imperfect people. Following Jesus is challenging and we fall short. But praise God, every day we can face that authority. We can let that authority wash over us and say, yes, it's trustworthy authority. Yes, it's good authority. Yes, it washes away all my fears. Yes, it cleanses me. Yes, it calls me to purpose. But what really motivates us is when we come to Jesus and say, you know what? I know what kind of man this is. This man has taken up everything for me. He's taken up my sin day in, day out, past, present, and future. And that's a man that I can trust. That's a man I can follow. That's a man I can fall in love with because he has fulfilled that prophecy. That's our Jesus. That's what kind of man he is. He's a man that has all authority. He can silence the winds and the waves with just a word. Man, we can trust and follow a man like that. He is a man that has a high purpose for all of us. It's not something mamsy-pamsy. It's not something soft. It's not filling a pew. It's not being Mr. Nice Guy. This is a radical call to be about the kingdom of the living and to forsake the society of death, and live and act and go in a life that really has eternal meaning. And as that's motivated, this is a man who died for us. He bears our infirmities. He continues to intercede for us. That's a Jesus we all can follow. I pray this morning that we answer that question, what kind of man is this for ourselves? Don't take my word for it. Jump into these scriptures, study the Bible, study out Elijah, see his calling, and know that your calling to follow Jesus is even greater. God has called us as a church for kingdom living, a real radical purpose. Let's get after it knowing that our Jesus is an incredible man. He is more than that. He's our authority, he's our God, and he is our Lamb. We thank you for joining us this morning. We hope you enjoyed our service. Please check out some of our information here on the next slide, and you can watch this sermon and all the worship on our YouTube page. We love you, and we hope you have a fantastic Sunday.